welcome and good morning. Thank you, welcome. We're happy to see you all this morning. My name is Laura Bate. I work on workforce development issues here at New America's Cybersecurity Initiative, and it is my pleasure to thank you all for being here this morning. I know for any Friday morning, but particularly a Friday morning in the middle of the summer, we're really thrilled to see this level of turnout. I think that it speaks for itself, the level of interest in this topic. I also want to say a particular thank you to Palo Alto Networks, who came to us with the original idea for this event and also provided the breakfast, which is critical to success for a Friday morning breakfast. Here at New America, we've spent a lot of time thinking about workforce development and how to increase the pipeline of workers coming into the industry. Of course, a very critical part of that is expanding the number of people and the types of people we think of as people who fit in the industry. We have our Humans of Cybersecurity project that you'll find online that incorporates stories from different individuals who work in the industry, who have passed through, telling their stories and just putting into evidence the fact that there are a range of backgrounds and a range of experiences that we see. And to that, we're thrilled to give you this current panel, and I'm happy to introduce Ian Wallace, the co-director of the Cybersecurity Initiative, to moderate. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you very much. And before I start, let me commend to you Laura's work on both on diversity and general cybersecurity workforce issues with Elizabeth Weingarten and others at New America. She's done some great work, and I encourage you to go online and follow that up. As Laura said, the purpose of this event is to, in potentially challenging times, make a sort of positive case for diversity and innovation in cybersecurity. At New America, one of the things that we feel is very important is storytelling and making public policy through listening to people's own stories and their experiences and lessons we can learn from those. We also, however, want to point out that particularly cybersecurity is an emerging field for which there are many paths both in and within. And I think listening to some of the stories that we're going to hear today, we'll get a sense of that. But we also are a public policy think tank, and there are some meaty policy issues that sit behind some of these issues. So as we go on, I think given that we have this fantastic group of women, we're going to dig into some of those issues as well. To introduce the panel briefly, and I am going to be brief because I'm going to ask them to tell us a little bit more about their own careers. We are joined by Deborah Plunkett. Deborah runs her own firm, Plunkett Associates, but in her past life was a director of information assurance at the National Security Agency, and was a senior advisor to the director on some of the diversity type issues that we're going to be talking about. Previously also served on the National Security Council. Next to Deborah, we have Randy Kiefer. She's currently the Vice President for Cybersecurity Audit at Capital One, but fairly recently left the Department for Homeland Security, where, amongst other things, she was Deputy Director of the National Cybersecurity Communications and Integration Center and Chief Information Security Officer for the Transportation Security Agency. So we don't do acronyms, but it does extend the length of the introduction. Next to her is Miho Matsubara, who is the Chief Security Officer for Japan at Palo Alto Networks, and she's had a career that's taken her into the Japanese Ministry of Defense and Hitachi in Japan. And on the end, we have Samara Moore, who's a Senior Manager for Critical Infrastructure Protection at Exelon, but previous to that, served on the National Security Council, where she was the Director for Cybersecurity, Critical Infrastructure Protection, and had a past career at the Department of Energy. So as you can tell, we have people who have experience in the private sector, in the public sector, and in a range of different cybersecurity roles. So I'm going to begin by asking a series of questions to the panelists. Then we're going to move into a moderated discussion. And then, with about half an hour to go, I'm going to open it up to the floor. So please have your questions ready. But to kick us off, Deborah, Um, how did you get into cybersecurity? And when you hear all of the sort of advice in this space, what's the one thing that you think people really should hear that they don't hear enough?
Great. So thank you again for the invitation to be here. It's really my pleasure. So, I got into cybersecurity really because of a foundation at the National Security Agency where I started my career in the mid-1980s, working first as an intelligence analyst when, cyber was just a dream. No one was much talking about it. Moving into the 90s, which is when things like Y2K hit the airwaves and raised lots of concerns nationwide, worldwide, about security and functionality of information systems. It was from there that I did that Y2K representational activity at the federal level, and then came back to NSA and ended up ultimately going to the White House and doing cybersecurity policy. And I'd say that was probably that period of time between 1998 and 2001 was really the time when things like the I Love You virus was beginning to rear its head, some of the early viruses that we began to worry about at a national level. And I happened to be working at the National Security Council, working in transnational threats, which was at that time where cybersecurity was happening, was being born. And so programs like CyberCorps, I got to stand up and run from the White House, and then ultimately bring that experience back up to NSA, which really has a robust, and probably had one of the earliest robust cyber missions, both from a security perspective, but also from an exploitation perspective. And sort of the rest is history. I moved through that system, working on both the exploitation side, and then ultimately really wrapping up my career on the security side, serving as the information assurance director. The one piece of advice, I think, when people think about cybersecurity, I think, and I hear from lots and lots of folks, particularly post-retirement, they're asking, what kind of certifications do I need? What kind of technical competence do I need? How do I gain those experiences? And that's all really, really critically important. But I'd say in cybersecurity, we need lots of technical people. We also need lots of folks who can think from a policy perspective. And that's the message I think I'd leave is we need folks who can write policy, who can envision what the future looks like, who can think about international norms and what we might need to do to contribute to the development of those norms in cyberspace. Folks who can lead people, who can lead organizations, who can lead through difficult and sometimes exciting and challenging times. And so that would be the biggest message I'd say, is that cyber really is a lot of technical work to be done, but there's a lot of work to be done on the policy and even on the legal side.
We're going to pick up on that, but Randy, how did you get to where you are now, and what's your piece of advice?
Sure. So I'll pick up sort of in the middle of where Debbie was speaking, right? So my story is more one of timing, right place, right time, with a background that matched. So I majored in criminal justice and computer science, was my minor from the George Washington University. And that was my father's influence, who was an IT executive recruiter who said, do something in computer science because that's the future and that's where it's going to go. I wasn't really the best programmer, so I made it my minor, and it really served me well. It gave me that technical foundation to be able to go after a brand new field where cyber didn't even exist back when I graduated. It was IT and information assurance and IT security. Cyber wasn't yet in the lexicon. And while I was pursuing my master's degree in computer fraud investigations, I approached a professor. It was a master's degree designed for the working professional, so it was at night and on weekends. And I approached a professor about working part-time, and I got a job at Fannie Mae as an intern in their risk management division, which we'll probably talk more about this later. I truly believe that cyber is all about risk management from the technical sense, from the policy sense, in every sense of it. If you have that underlying risk management business foundation, it will take you far. It's understanding how to enable a mission in a very risk-appropriate way. Without the mission, there is no cyber. So that's a big lesson that I've learned along the way. From there, I really sought areas. I got in government right away. I was working as a contractor after Fannie Mae, And my client called me up one day and said, would you be interested in my position? And I encourage you to apply. And that's how I started in government. What separated me on my path was always looking for areas where the biggest challenge was. Every boss I had, what's your biggest challenge and where can I help? And that's really what set me apart. Also communication, and that would be the biggest piece of advice that I have. The technical credentials are necessary. The policy piece of it is critically important. The ability to communicate in every way imaginable, up, down, across, will separate you from those that can't, right? There are many people that are just not comfortable with it. I encourage, if you're one of those and that resonates with you, practice. Step out of your comfort zone, take a class, learn how to speak, and learn how to communicate what it is you're trying to say, because that you will then become that go-to person, and you will open up doors for yourself that you may not have known were there.
Miho, you've built your career outside the United States, but you have similarly followed the path that's taken you from government to private sector. Can you tell us a bit more about how you got to where you are and what advice you might have for people starting out in the industry?
Sure. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited about talking about innovation and diversity in cybersecurity. So the reason why I came to work in the cybersecurity is because I happened to work on cybersecurity when I was in the government, Ministry of Defense. And I got out to do my master's degree in Washington, D.C. on Fulbright. But back then, back in 2009, cybersecurity was not as hot or sexy as today. Yeah, I don't think we used the word cybersecurity back then. And then, but I still was so much care about security and safety for people because it's a foundation of our lives on national security or international security. And one of my science classmates asked me, like, hey, Miho, I'm looking for somebody who can write about China and cybersecurity. And I didn't know like, what she wants to focus on, but I'm like, hey, I think I can do this. So my piece of advice is, well, as you said, you have to challenge yourself sometimes to get out of your comfort zone, to take the chance to do something different. And then, because I'm a foreigner, I'm not a US citizen, and it was the first time for me to publish something in English about cybersecurity. And it was back in 2010. And again, I didn't know if I want to do cybersecurity career path because it wasn't there yet. But it actually helped me a lot afterward. Like, hey, so I have something in English, peer-reviewed later. And one of my science classmates started to work for a cybersecurity company in Washington, D.C. And he put me in touch with East Asia cyber threat intelligence analyst. And he said, oh, hey, Miho, I know that you are interested in East Asia and security. Maybe not necessarily cybersecurity, but maybe you want to talk to him. So I had the coffee with him, and I stayed in touch. And even though I was not able to get a job there, but I started to send English summaries of what's going on in Japan on cybersecurity or cyber threats for a year. And that commitment helped me to be recognized that, okay, so she can do this. So because I was not able to get to work in the United States right after my degree here, but it helped me to get a job in Japan. So my piece of advice is that, well, try to show your values to people around you and find the champions who wants to endorse you. And also to be a good communicator, because cybersecurity is about everything. It touches upon every single aspect of national security or daily lives or risk management. And you never know who wants to help you or who needs your help. So you have to be very flexible, and you have to be very ambitious and trying to be a great teammate for everybody around you.
Samara, same question. How did you get to where you are? And given that, what do you think other people can learn from your experience?
Sure. So again, thank you as well for inviting me to participate on this panel. I'm honored to participate with these accomplished women. I will start out with my first piece of advice, and that is really to follow your passion and your interest. And I think that's really what has brought me along in my career. You know, in high school, I was motivated by my coach to go into engineering. And I did so, and I found it interesting, but that was, you know, mid-90s, and I realized this thing called information systems was popping up. I was interested, so I jumped into that. And that really has just led me along the way. I started out doing work within IT, and throughout my career, I've really gone back and forth between working in the IT field and then the cybersecurity field. And as I've moved along in my years, I realized they're really the same field. Doing work securely is the way we should be doing. Looking at them separately is not really the way to go, particularly now, as we've already heard, we do security so we can enable some function, some capability, some business. You don't do security as a means unto itself. So finishing college, and so, you know, similar to your story, there wasn't a cybersecurity program, so I actually have an undergrad in accounting and information systems. And I got an internship in the late 90s doing enterprise risk services, where the industry was really just starting to look at risk management and how computers and systems could be manipulated to have a negative impact on a company. And that's where I got my feet wet. And because it was so new, I had so many opportunities to try different fields because it was new for everyone. So there was no need to hold myself back because there really was no expert in the field. And so my, you know, advice really is to go for it, learn as you go, be a continual learner. But don't hold yourself back from something because you don't know, because guess what? There's some other ambitious person out there who's going to go for it too. So we all might as well go in and collectively work towards the cause. So anyway, in doing consulting, I worked for a client, a government client, and they asked me to come on board. Again, very similar. And I did so thinking, sure, I'll try this for a little while. And what I learned in my experience was a little while turned into 10 years. I absolutely loved my government service and got so much exposure and so much opportunity because I was willing just to step out there, you know. And then I hit a point, I had wonderful opportunities in multiple departments. I had a wonderful opportunity to serve as part of the National Security Council staff at the White House. And then after that, decided to go into private sector. I found a passion for the energy industry and had a wonderful opportunity to go work for Exelon, one of our nation's largest energy providers. And I'm really enjoying now being able to apply both my technical hands-on skills that I've had in the past, both in IT and security, as well as the policy and program management side.
And I should have said up front, these jobs never stop. So Samara may have to jump out at some point in the future, so don't be surprised if she steps off the stage. But she will hopefully join us later when we have a conversation. But one thing I pick up as a sort of common theme across all of these is there are some great jobs out there which you have come to from different places, but by all accounts come to love. And yet, if you look at the statistics for women and minorities in the sort of cybersecurity workforce at large, and defining that is pretty difficult, I know. The figures are pretty terrible, low double digits. So two questions which kind of clearly relate to each other. In terms of the people coming in, is it just that those people in schools and universities are simply not getting the advice, the message, the opportunities that you guys had? Or is it that employers aren't seeing the benefits from having highly qualified sort of women coming through? And how do we go about changing that?
So I'll jump in. I don't think I don't think it's the latter, that they're not seeing the benefit at all. That's never been my experience. And I agree, right? There's very few women and minorities. I cannot tell you how many tables I've sat around that lack diversity in any way imaginable. And I don't know that there's always an awareness of it until it comes up in terms of diversity inclusion efforts that nearly every government agency and every corporation has. That's becoming a bigger and bigger field, both in government and private sector. Now that I have a smidge of experience in private sector, I'm seeing it much more prevalently than I do in the government, which is really great to see. I do think that both government and industry can do a better job in funneling to the universities where the technical expertise is coming, and then can actually make a pitch to all, both genders, all diverse cultures and backgrounds, and go after them. And so I think there are some government agencies that do this better with others, that partner, especially with some of the local universities here. I know George Mason has a program that gets people in government. GW recruits quite heavily in some of the agencies, or agencies recruit through GW. And industry is starting to do this as well. But I think that that's absolutely critical, especially in cyber, to build off of what Samara was saying. Our stories sort of generate in the 90s where this was new. I'd argue that cyber is a continually new field, and whatever skills you had 10 years ago do not apply today. Those technical skills evolve faster than imaginable, right? So that intellectual curiosity and targeting that new talent that's coming out, that's up to speed on today's skills is absolutely key. So I think that's one of the things that we can do to both encourage the university, the college pursuit, and then funnel that right into the hiring process.
I'd say the discussion about the lack of capacity from a diversity and gender perspective in cybersecurity is not a whole lot different from the same discussions we were having years ago about women in math and about women in computer science. What makes it so much more compelling today is that we need so much more capacity in cybersecurity than we have ever needed in math or in traditional computer science. So that really makes the business case. And if we simply look at demographic trends, it doesn't take a really smart person to see that there are going to be a lot more women available in the workplace and a lot more people of color available in the workplace. So it's almost a no-brainer that we need to figure out how to leverage that capacity in this critical field where we as a nation have a significant deficit in capacity. And so while it's true, I agree with Randy, we've got to work more closely with colleges and universities to recruit, targeted recruiting at universities that have capacity in the areas of women and minorities. It has to start so much earlier than that. We have to go into the K through 12 arena. You know, the kids who are in school today are better than many of us in using their devices. This is going to be very natural for them and not intimidating and exciting even, but we have to entice them and excite them and make it such that it's not a regulatory, burdensome place to work, but actually an exciting and challenging area of discovery and using your technical expertise to make the world a better place for all of us. So I'd say we've got to get into the schools, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, much, much earlier. We've got to do targeted recruiting at colleges and universities that have the capacity. It just defies logic, if we're trying to increase diversity, that we would aim our recruiting efforts at a university that is not diverse. It doesn't mean you don't go there, but it means if you're trying to get a diverse population, you make sure you also go to places where there are diverse candidates.
Thank you. So, well, let's face it, the reality is pretty harsh right now. The only 11% of cybersecurity workforce today is women. And the ratio drops significantly when you talk to the minorities. But I still see the silver lining. So for example, my company, Palo Networks, launched first national cybersecurity badges for Girl Scouts in the United States a couple months ago. And we are so excited to talk to young Girl Scouts, K-12 people to raise cybersecurity awareness and teach them about an online safety class. And because the reason why the ratio of women or minorities are so low in cybersecurity workforce today is because lots of women and minorities gave up to learning about STEMs before going to colleges. So you have to make sure that you have to reach out to potential cybersecurity workforce pipelines to encourage young girls, K-12, or even before that, like, hey, so this is actually cool. See, this is so fascinating, and there are so many opportunities and learning skills, and you can do anything about it. And then I'm sure that things will start to change, not only just women or minorities, but also we have to talk to the leadership, the management, because mentorship is so important, because young girls and also minorities need a little bit encouragement. This is the chance. You should go for it. And then we're going to see more women and inclusiveness and diversity in cybersecurity.
I'd like to highlight a different dimension to the same question, and that is, one, there's an existing workforce out there, and I have repeatedly run into individuals who are maybe mid into their career who want to shift into cybersecurity and find it really challenging. And so I think having an open mind to not just developing the pipeline, which is very important, but also where there are opportunities to leverage prior experience that may not be directly in cybersecurity, but really relate. As I mentioned earlier, understanding our business is important, more now than ever. There is very little of a company's mission that is accomplished without technology or cybersecurity. So if you understand the business, you can be key in helping to better secure how that is run and managed. So I think there's opportunities for us to be innovative and find ways to leverage existing employees as well. And
fantastic point. We've done some work on sort of what we've called sort of lateraling into cybersecurity jobs, and where there are lots of jobs and very capable people who sort of see those jobs but don't know quite how to get into them. I guess two questions. One is, what's your advice to particularly those women and minorities who kind of to encourage them to come into those jobs? And secondly, what do you think can be done to your point, to make that easier?
So I'll briefly respond to do your part to get educated in the field and understand it, but then to demonstrate how you can apply that, because theory and book knowledge is important and good, but really understanding and being able to apply it is all the better. When you show that you understand the business or a different side and can apply security to that, that is huge, that is powerful. But to have a certification alone without the experience is challenging. And so really being able to apply, and so then how do you get to that? It's really connecting with people, taking the initiative, really finding someone who may be doing what you're interested in, learning from them, and trying to take advantage of those opportunities, sometimes volunteer opportunities, to figure out how do I make those connections so then you can demonstrate that. But it is challenging.
It really is challenging, and you brought up a really great point, because I teach in a graduate school in a cybersecurity program, and many of my students are in that exact place. They're mid-career, they're pursuing advanced education in cybersecurity, and they want to know, how do I break in? They're still asking, how do I break in? And so, it's a difficult challenge, because ultimately at that level, you really need an opportunity. You need someone willing to take a chance, to risk, really take a risk, viewed as a risk on a mid-career individual. So I guess my advice really is more for those who have the capacity and authority to hire, is to take a risk. Be willing to pick somebody who doesn't look like you. Be willing to give someone an opportunity who has demonstrated perhaps academic accomplishment, but has not had an opportunity to apply that in the workplace, and give them an opportunity. Every single one of us, I think, could probably call out that somebody reached down and gave us a hand. They gave us an opportunity.
And can you just expand on that? Why should employers take a risk? What benefit does it bring to the organization?
Sure. So go back to the beginning, which was we have a significant deficit of cybersecurity capacity in the United States. You know, numbers of in the billions even. I mean, I've heard worldwide from a deficit perspective. And so if you're not able to retain and recruit and retain from college, because particularly the top students are highly sought after and hard to get and hard to keep, then why not invest in a student who has perhaps demonstrated capacity, maybe even in a different career field, but successfully, but now is willing to make a change and has applied themselves academically to learn what they need in order to do it. Give them an opportunity. I mean, what you gain is the maturity of a person who's had a couple of experiences, been through a couple of things. And so some stability, and then the opportunity to invest.
I think I have a couple of thoughts, and it just kind of combines everything. What I'm hearing a lot from the women on stage and my own experience as well is it's a lot of who you know. So networking is key, right? And if it's a field that you're trying to break into, go find that specific network and talk to people, because it's going to be somebody who's going to give you that chance. And if they get to know you a little bit, even outside of an office setting, that's what you're looking for, right? I mean, this world still works a lot in who you know. And so if you can find that right person and you can begin to establish a relationship and some level of trust, that's easier for somebody to give you an opportunity than somebody who doesn't know you at all. My second thought on this is, it goes back a little bit to the communication, but also a value proposition, right? So if you're in a field that seems unrelated, I'd challenge you to figure out where that link is and what value you can bring, right? So if you're in a communications field, to me that one's a no-brainer, right? But we could pick a music field, right? There's mathematics in music that can apply to cyber. And so we can go on. We can play with this in almost any field, but be able to demonstrate what that is, right? And learn, if you're within a company and you know the business side, and now you want to break into cyber because it's a pretty lucrative field, and I think that that's a really smart path to go down, then demonstrate that business value, because to me, from a hiring manager, the business side of it's invaluable. I can bring in all the technical experts I want. If they don't understand how the business works, and it's one of my aha moments, having worked in the IT side several times, and then going out to visit the field, the users of the IT systems, how much I didn't understand about their day-to-day, what their challenges were with the system. I didn't really know what they did until I went out to visit them. So having that business perspective, to me, is invaluable because I lived through that on the other side. And so then the willingness to learn the cyber, the technical part of it, great, I'm willing to have you. But make that connection for them, because not everybody might have that experience.
Let's talk a little bit more about mentorship, because as you say, having someone you can go to and ask for advice is extremely important for anyone in the workplace, but particularly when you're feeling you're different perhaps to some of your colleagues. On the one hand, can any of you point to sort of organizations or organized networks that can be helpful? And second, have you any advice both for mentees looking for mentors or for mentors who feel that they have an opportunity to help and some advice for how they should go about that? Let's start with the organized groups. Are there any networks that you can encourage people to tap into?
Well, I know of one. There are probably several, but one I'll call out immediately is the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals. Fairly new, a couple of years old, great support from the Hill, really focused on providing opportunities for minorities in cybersecurity, from mentoring to providing an opportunity to work on campuses, to get hands-on experience in touching and manipulating and doing cyber in a real-time way, to pointing folks to fellowships, providing fellowships and scholarships. So it's icmcp.org, and it's a great organization.
Great, thank you.
I'll mention two. There are many, but I'll mention two. One is the Executive Women's Forum, and it's not just at the executive level. They work to develop women along their career, and it's not just women helping women, it's everyone helping women. It's a diverse group in itself. I actually went to one of their conferences a few years ago and was just blown away by the level of the quality of the presentations and sessions, both on professional development as well as technically. Another one is women in industry. I know that's in energy. I know that's industry specific, but that's another good networking, and it really has individuals involved that are all along the spectrum of their career.
I can point AFCIA, Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association. So do you know AFCIA? If you work in the defense industry or defense sector, you know this. So it's a DoD associated non-profit organization, and it has chapters all over the world, and especially it has some chapters in the DC area, and it focuses upon networking and also raising awareness on tech, defense, intelligence, and cybersecurity, of course, these days. So they have a lot of events, seminars, workshops, and if you go to those events, and if you do homework enough, it's like, okay, so this speaker is really interesting. Her background or his background looks so relevant to me, then you should talk to her or talk to him right after the event. Don't just go there and come back right after the event. Yeah, then because it's a chance to get recognized. Because when you are young or you are trying to shift your career path, you have to have recognition and ambition and courage to take a one step forward, to change your gear, to close the gap. Because the reason why you want to get into this field is because you see the gap and you can help out to close it.
So mine are the same. I'll do, I've participated in FCA many events as well as the Women's Forum, and I too speak highly of them. I think I'll give you a little experience from my Capital One side. They have a tremendous Women in Technology program that I found right when I started. I've only been there about 7 weeks, so this transition is still new to me. But one thing that I'm actually fascinated with this Women in IT group is there's a brother group, I'll call it, called the Male Allies. And that comes to all the events with the women in IT. And the fact that they've actually named it is really fascinating to me, because my own personal story, most of my mentors are male. And they're the ones that have sort of guided me or given me opportunities along the way. And my guess is, if we dig into your stories, there's men that took a chance, right, that knew the value in diversity and that were champions of mine to get me to that next level, wherever that was. So Capital One, at least, has actually named it. And they have people from various places within the business so that there's somebody that you can go to if you're interested, who's willing to at least help you along the way, potentially give you an opportunity, whether it's a detail or a voluntary assignment, whatever it may be. But that's still real while we work to solve this problem.
My next question, which is that's great, and there's quite a personal question. It's like, what is your advice to men, and particularly white men, who want to see the benefits of bringing people into a workforce that needs talent, but don't necessarily have the experience of mentoring, particularly women and people of color in this space? And it might be that the advice is just do what you do with everyone else, but I would welcome your thoughts on that.
So I would say that, so when we're talking about diversity, sometimes the discussion only focuses on hitting the number. And I think it's wrong, because diversity should be inclusion as well. To pay respect to different cultures, backgrounds, minorities, and everything. something different from you because they can bring values to your team or to yourself. So my advice to senior male leadership is like, okay, so try to think about what you want to see to happening to your daughter or your wife or your sisters. Then because their mindset will totally change, like, okay, I don't want this happening to my daughter or my mother or my sisters. Then they can personalize and like, okay, so this is something I can offer to these women.
I think I'd say do a gut check. Think about those that you currently mentor, and maybe you don't even call it mentoring, but it probably is, right? Think of those that you might pull aside and give some advice to, or send them an email to say, hey, I heard a job is opening up, and think about what they look like. And then challenge yourself to get outside of your norm and to pick up someone who doesn't look like you, someone who doesn't think like you, someone who comes from a different background. And my greatest joy from a mentor perspective is that you gain so much from mentoring someone who doesn't look like you, who doesn't have your background. But it's going to take a significant number of people that look like you, Ian, having that courage that's already been spoken of in order to more quickly and sufficiently advance the number of women and minorities in cyber.
Well, I would just say, there are many out there who are, and so for those that are, I would say, speak up to your peers, challenge your peers to do the same. And when you see things going on around you that maybe you wouldn't have done and you don't approve of, don't be quiet. Challenge the community to continue to move forward in this area.
Just pivoting slightly, picking up something Randy mentioned, this is a constantly evolving space, and one of the things that as you know better than I do, is going to change cybersecurity over the next decade is artificial intelligence and computers doing the work that people currently do, or certainly used to do in the past. That, of course, provides an opportunity for those people who get ahead of that game. What advice are you giving both to sort of girls at school or women and other people in the workforce who about future-proofing their careers and making sure that they're going to be in the best-paying jobs of the next decade?
So I was just on the West Coast last week through a cyber fellowship, actually, having this conversation about the future of cyber and machine learning and AI. So to demystify some of machine learning and AI, it is still math, right? We are still programming mathematically computers to do something better, more efficiently, optimizing something. However, even though it can learn, and a machine is now so evolved with enough horsepower that it can learn on its own, still nothing will replace human ingenuity and creativity, right? We have yet to teach a computer that, or mathematically code that. So I caution against that everything is going away. I do think that the future of jobs is changing. And after 2 days of talking about this, I have 2 daughters, they're 1 and 3, and I had a conversation with my husband. How do we raise them to be successful in this next generation? Because it's not going to look like what everyone in this room went through. And so I think that there's a few fields that I think the medical field is completely safe from this for a while. I think machines will help in operations and medicine, but I think that's still good, right? And computers is one of them, though, right? So embracing this, absolutely being able to understand the math and science behind what makes machine learning and AI move. This is higher level thinking that will be necessary to steer this in a good direction, right? If we're cyber professionals in this room, we sort of think about the risks involved in some of this, and AI and machine learning can be scary at the same time, right? So it's going to take a generation of responsible thinking youth to move this in the right direction. But that being said, STEM now becomes imperative in a background, and absolutely at the K through 12, right? If you need that foundational understanding to be able to take these fields into wherever they're going to go, which I don't think we can even imagine what that looks like today.
I find the question interesting because when you talk about how we're advancing technology, all I see is opportunity. So I think for a cybersecurity field, security is ever and increasingly more important and innovative ways to do so. So the way we have done security the last 20, 30 years may not and likely is not the way we need to do security into the future. So let's kind of figure that out and let's be a part of that and ride along with this change.
One of the projects we've been running here in New America is a project on the future of work. And one of the things that we're taking forward is cybersecurity as an opportunity within that context for, as some jobs disappear, potential to build new careers in this space. And that one of the real opportunities that we've been exploring is the potential for careers, not just in the federal government, but in local and state governments who are increasingly deal with these challenges. Every one of you has spent some time in government and in the private sector, even if it's just a short amount of time. When people come to you and say, where do I get my start? Government, private sector, somewhere else? What advice are you giving them? And what do you think are the pros and cons of different places to start your career?
I'll start with the consultant answer, right? It depends. And so there isn't a cookie cutter approach on where to go. It's about what are you interested in, where do you shine, and then how do the opportunities match up with what you're looking to do now? Or it may be, how does this opportunity help you get to where you want to be in 5 years or in 10 years? So it's really weighing them. But I don't know that I would easily say, oh, you must start in government or you must start in industry. It's really about what aligns with your interest and your passion at that time.
What are the pros and cons of either? Deborah?
I'd say, first of all, that times have changed. That we will likely have very few like me with 31 years in government. That time is probably past. And instead, we'll have folks, especially technical folks, moving in and out of government. And I think that is a phenomenal scenario because government gets the benefit of the experience that one would gain on the outside, and then private sector gets the experience and coming back and forth. So when folks come to me and ask, here are the pros of government, stability, an opportunity to work on some of the nation's most challenging programs, problems, an opportunity to serve, not to be hokey, but an opportunity to serve the nation, and not having to worry about billable hours, bottom lines, but you don't make the pay, and so that really is the balance. Is on the private sector side, you can make more money. Yeah, as far as working hard, I think both can challenge you significantly to work hard depending on where you might land. So I think you still get an opportunity to work as hard. You might have to work harder because you're billing on the side of private industry. The opportunity to travel, I think both can provide that as determined by where you go. And so, it's really easy to say you get paid more in the private sector and less in government. But it's much deeper than that. When in government, I had mid-career folks come out of private sector into government because they were ready to have family. They needed lots of leave. They needed the stability that provides. That's a very legitimate reason to come in. And then after you've raised your family a bit, then you can go into maybe back into private sector where you have some more personal flexibility.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about my story and some of what I appreciated about the government. And I agree with everything you said. There's no answer for this. All experiences get you to where you are and hopefully build on that from where you want to go. What I appreciated about the government is a tremendous emphasis on leadership development. There's opportunity and training galore in this space, and it's not just reading a book. It's like in-person training. It's fellowships to network amongst groups and peers. and really these people that you evolve with in your career that may diverge, and now you have a person in another agency or in the private sector that you can still call upon because you have some experience. I've been through several of those fellowships, and I call people all the time, and they pick up the phone, and it's like you just pick up right where you left off. The other thing, there was a time in my career when I actually stepped out of cyber. So I had been doing compliance and FISMA compliance, and I started having nightmares in red, yellow, green stoplight charts. And I decided that there was more to life than red, yellow, green stoplight charts. So I really looked for a good leader in government, and again, asked him what his biggest challenge was and let me try it. And it turned out to be a law enforcement technology initiative, and he needed help in communications and outreach. So I was like, sure, let's give it a go. And I did that laterally, right? The government, I think, is one unique place where you can sort of change career fields and not have to start all the way back over, right? I didn't have to take a pay cut. I didn't have to go back to school. He was willing to leverage my confidence, the skills that I had built, and my project and program management skills to apply it in a new area. And again, that intellectual curiosity of, I can do this. And if it doesn't work out, then move me, right? And so from there, I then became the chief of staff of that program and filled out my business portfolio. So I learned all about acquisitions and budget and training and HR. And then that's when cyber really started to take a boom, and I came back in. And now I had this really nice, robust portfolio of not just the technical background, but now all the business elements as well, which is when I stepped into the CISO role and created a functioning organization that included all of those pieces. But that was a risk. It was a risk to step out. Somebody had to give me a chance. I had to prove myself, but it was knowing where I needed to fill out my portfolio to really be successful at a higher level, which is where I wanted to be. The government afforded me that opportunity. Maybe the private sector would too, I simply don't know. Now in the private sector, they move way faster, right? So government, it takes a while to implement a system. Private sector, I've now, even in 7 weeks there, I've seen one stand up in a week, right? We need this, we've identified a need, we have the money for it, let's do it. And they did. And so that's like, wow, like, ooh, that's fun, right? Like that's like a kind of energizing that would have taken at least 6 months to a year in the government. And I know cloud and agile, we're doing better and we're going faster at all this, but it's still difficult in the government. So that's exciting, and that really can be energizing to know that everything you learn about project management, from like cost, schedule, scope, triple constraint, like you can do it in a week too, and it still works.
So I have an experience in working in the Japanese government, American think tank, Japanese industry, and American industries. So it really depends on what kind of opportunities you see and what kind of values you want to bring in. And it's all about timing too. And because numbers touched upon the benefits of working in a think tank or academia, I can share a little bit about my experiences. So I think the beauty to work in academia, think tank, is you can hold neutral position, and you also have a greater freedom of speech. So you can publish a lot, and you can also hold events like this to reach out to the larger population you would never think of in the government or in the industry. Because if you work for a private sector, because you will focus on the specialty of your company or your specialty of the government sector. But if you're in a think tank, you can be more creative. I'm not saying that the government or private sector are not creative, but you have a more freedom to come up with projects, to reach out to also. So for instance, this is about innovation and also diversity in cybersecurity. And it's easier for think tanks to do this rather than the government.
I'm going to open this up to the floor because there are a lot of people here who have, I'm sure, some really great questions. But I'm going to preempt that with one final question for myself. This conversation doesn't happen enough, but when it does, sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't. So my final question is, what really bothers you about the sort of diversity in cybersecurity conversations? What are we getting wrong, and how can we address that?
It bothers me that it's a thing, right? Just in general. And maybe it's because I'm a woman, and so I come with a different perspective that I just want the best person for the job. And I'm going to cast a wide net to find that, whatever the job may be. And yeah, I'm going to be deliberate in making a diverse group because in my experience, diverse groups are more successful. And let me be clear, when I say that, when I look for diversity, I'm not always looking for certain jobs that need technical skills, and that's kind of a no-brainer. But what makes a good organization is the people, period, right? If you take care of your people, if you put together a high-functioning team where you have an introvert and an extrovert that can pair up and bring the best out of each other, bring the introvert out, tamp the extrovert down, you have people that can but it's true, right? I mean, you need to balance a whole team. So when I speak about diversity, I'm looking for skills, both technically and those soft skills, that I want to balance out my team so that I know if I need a new perspective, we've tried something and it's not working, I'm going to bring in someone who I know thinks differently than me because I'm missing something. Again, though, I've had a lot of leadership training to not be afraid of that. That's sort of been my experience, is that the teams that, the environments that I've been in that didn't work that way had some lack of leadership at the top that wasn't willing to take that chance. And it's why I made it my personal mission to continue to go up that rank so that I could demonstrate it to others and start breaking down some of those barriers. So that's not a golden answer that you're looking for, but it's my experience there.
One of the things that we want to get to in this kind of conversation is how do we improve the quality of the dialogue so that we contribute to a better workforce at the end of the day. Anyone else want to chip in before we open it up?
Sure. I sometimes feel frustrated when some people try to define really narrowly about cybersecurity jobs or cybersecurity career paths, because some people only think that, okay, so cybersecurity is just about technologies or solutions. Yes, technologies and solutions are so important and crucial to solve problems, but we also need soft skills, strategists, policymakers, lawyers, and also like national security or threat intelligence or SOC builders. So, because as I said, because every single aspect of our daily lives and national security touches upon IT and also cybersecurity these days. So you have to understand that everything around you are relevant to cybersecurity. And maybe your job title currently doesn't say cybersecurity or something, or IT. You can take advantage of your background from the past and the current ones to say like, hey, so I've been helping this to close the gap between this and this. So I'm confident that I can get into this field to take a job as a cybersecurity analyst or strategist or policymakers. Then because it is also helpful for your potential employers too, because then they can realize, okay, I never thought about it, but actually you're right, because this is relevant to cybersecurity. I need you. So this is all about closing the gaps and team building, and winning the champions to endorse you.
You know you're in DC when the recommendations are we need to be more supportive of think tankers and lawyers. But if you have a question, please stick up your hand. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and end your question with a question mark. Start over here. And Yun, my colleague, has the microphone. So for the benefit of people online, please speak into the microphone.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kathy, and I'm with Palo Alto Networks. My question is, one of the things that I have found about Palo Alto Networks, I have worked my entire career basically as a contractor for the government until I came into Palo Alto Networks. And the last 2 summers, we've had some amazing interns working for us. And I have nieces and nephews. I don't have children of my own. And I was talking to the interns trying to understand what it was that they did that set them apart from other people that got them internships at Palo Alto Networks. And I actually made my nephew come in and meet all of the interns so that they could talk to him about what is it that makes you somebody that we want to have within our organization. So my question is, what can we do to help these kids understand? I'm super excited about the Girl Scouts of the USA and the work that we're going to be doing with them. I'm a Girl Scout, and my niece got her Gold Award. That helped her get into college. My nephews they both have gotten their, the Eagle Award, their Eagle Scout from Boy Scouts. That also helped them get into college. So what is it that we can do from an organizational perspective to help these young kids understand what is it that I need to do to set myself aside, or so that I'm more noticeable in this community so that I can get these types of internship opportunities. Most of the interns that we had, we found them. They didn't find us. So how do we find these kids? How do we work with these kids, and how do we grow them?
So to build on that, particularly with interns, but more generally, what role can the private sector play to help people into the cybersecurity community?
Well, I mean, private sector has resources, got lots and lots of dollars, right? You know, public schools, local schools, particularly public schools, would welcome mentoring, sponsorship of programs. I mean, I know I've done it since I've been retired, and they with open arms welcome you in. So look at how you might, in your local community, have an impact by investing in mentoring, in programs, in camps, in summer opportunities, in internship opportunities, in exposure opportunities, to give kids and high schoolers and even college students a chance.
Right, I think my advice is similar. I think there's many companies, Capital One is an example, that really values involvement in the local community. So we're headquartered here in McLean, and we are involved a lot with the schools, and not just the colleges, especially the high schools and the elementary schools. We have big offices in Richmond, same thing there. So anywhere you see Capital One, they're involved in the local community. So as you're raising children, right, find where those local companies are that may have some program that you can get involved in. Capital One also has an associate rotation program, I think. So it's students fresh out of school that literally rotate around to try to hit that more millennial mentality of let's try a few things so you can figure out what you want, as opposed to committing to something and then jumping around very quickly to try to figure it out kind of the harder way. So that's a way that I'm watching where a company is actually adjusting to the new kind of mentality that comes out. And they do rotate through cyber, and sometimes we keep them and sometimes we let them go. But the girls who code those programs, that's an area to target also for hiring. I've done some events with them as well. I mean, there's just great opportunities now at that younger level to get involved and really set yourself apart.
Miha, we'll come to you. But also, what are the things that you, when you're looking for interns, to pick up Kathy's point, you say, that's an example of someone I want to bring in. If young people are thinking, how can they get ahead, what sort of opportunities should they be looking for?
So internships are one thing, but the challenges young people often encounter is the lack of experience and lack of recognition. And also, they sometimes don't know what kind of job will be dream for them in the future. So I would advise them to trying to go into cybersecurity conferences or events in your local community as much as possible, and also talking to people who are sitting right next to you, or who are speaking, hey, so I found your story really fascinating, and how can it be like you, or something like that. Then you can start a conversation, and maybe he or she doesn't have good advice, but they should have some contact to share with you to help them to be a mentor in the future.
Okay, I think we had another question in the middle. And I should mention Yun, who's bringing the the microphone is one of our fantastic interns. So.
Hi, my name is Ashwita. I recently graduated from American University with a master's degree focusing on cybersecurity and internet policy. I'm currently on the job hunt, which is, a lot of fun. So my question to you, I guess, is, while on my job hunt, I found a lot of jobs that are super technical for, penetration testing, information security, et cetera. Is there really a capacity deficit on the policy side of things? And as hiring managers, and this goes to you too, Ian, what would persuade you to hire someone of, an international student or someone who's not American in this field?
I believe there is a deficit on the policy side, for sure, too. Particularly with, because many of the folks who are in policy space today, grew up, particularly if we're talking about government, grew up in the government, had a career maybe in other places, and transitioned. What policy could benefit from is fresh thinking. And that fresh thinking comes from experiences outside of government, whether it's in academia or think tanks or private sector. And so there absolutely, I believe, is a need for more capacity on the policy side. And what would make you pick someone for such an opportunity? I think having demonstrated, obviously, wherever you came from, having demonstrated success in it, whatever your story, that you've had some success in it, that you've had some opportunities to learn, and you're able to articulate that. I have to foot stomp Randy's comments about communications. You've got to be able to communicate. You've got to be able to represent yourself. You've got to be able to tell your story succinctly, because many times you will only have a couple of minutes with someone to make an impression. Always have something ready to hand, because again, a couple of minutes might be all you have. And then take advantage of those networking opportunities to include big conferences like RSA. 40,000 people, it's tough because there's so many people, it's overwhelming, but so many great opportunities there to meet with professionals, to make contacts, to schedule follow-on opportunities to discuss potentials.
So I used to be a non-American student in Washington, D.C. between 2009 and 2011. And I can totally relate to that. As a foreigner here, it's so challenging to get into the security field because, well, you have some deficit here. But at the same time, so I was so working really hard to think about, okay, so how can I get a job? Because I was jobless when I was a student here. And I knew that I have to find a job when I go back to Japan. So I was thinking really hard, okay, so I really need to get a job after this. And then I'm like, okay, so I have to be recognized. So I went to many conferences, and I was sitting in the back because, of course, because I was a student, I cannot be a speaker. But I did my homework. I tried to understand the agenda and also about the speakers. And I raised my hand every single Q&A session and tried to come up with smart questions as much as possible to trying to be remembered. Because if you are just sitting in the back, you are nobody. But if you can speak up, just like you did, you have a courage to do that. And I'm so impressed with it. And if you do that, then somebody may talk to you afterward, like, hey, so you asked a really good question. And then you might start a conversation with her or with him or their colleagues or mentors. And well, this may not be able to give you a job right now in like next month, but maybe in the future you can get a better opportunities to get hired.
Randy? The only additional advice I would offer is, certainly if you're interested in getting in the policy world, is get out there and write and talk. And one of the advantages of modern technology is there are lots of avenues to get your writing out there. And given the sort of immaturity of this space, there's plenty of sort of white space where there are opportunities to provide your voice and quickly build yourself into the only person who's really writing in that space. And certainly speaking for someone who recruits into a think tank, I'm relatively confident that people can learn their subject. Learning how to write well and to speak well is much more challenging. If you can prove that, you're halfway there. If you can build your personal brand by sort of and basically have name recognition, even if you're relatively junior, you're halfway to getting a job. And that's, you know, in some ways, if you're coming from a slightly different background, you have an opportunity. Some of the best sort of new cybersecurity related policy work is cybersecurity and something. Cybersecurity in states, cybersecurity and sort of workforce issues, cybersecurity and international development, which is something we're doing here. And if you come in with that extra expertise, may even be geographic, you can be different from everyone else in the space. Right, wow, all the questions going up. We're going to come over to this side, to the front here. And we're going to start grouping up some questions soon, so I'll try and get through everyone if we can.
Hi, my name is Megan Abloy. I'm with a nonprofit based here in DC, Internews. I'm working for the global technology team. So my question is really on how to combat some stereotypes. I've similarly been in many spaces and rooms where I'm the only woman, or been at conferences where we break out, and if it's the security group, again, I'm like the only woman. And in the open source developer world, the sort of the imbalance is even worse. So any advice that you guys have on how to deal with that? I know it becomes increasingly frustrating when it happens so often. So any advice you guys have?
So we, and apologies to the men in the room, but from a women perspective, we can be our best allies, right? So go and recruit, and go and talk to other women and get them interested and introduce them to other people and pass their resumes around. As a federal hiring manager, I hired women. I was proud of that, right? So one day at a time, right? And we'll change it by one hire at a time, and you can begin to change the shape of that room and what it looks like. But yeah, it's going to be frustrating, and we're not there yet. There's a lot of room for improvement, but we absolutely have ownership of that space.
And in the interim, until that happens, don't be marginalized. As the woman in the room, don't allow yourself to be. Be an equal player, demand it, contribute, and demand the same level of respect and attention and opportunity to contribute as every other person in the room.
So we're going to group up some questions. So stick your hand up. We'll take 3 questions at a time, and then we'll start to get into a slightly rapid-fire answer session. So one here, one on the second row, and one at the back on this side, and then we'll come over here for the next one.
All right. Well, thank you. Monty McGee with the State Department. I work on communications around cyber issues. So my question is really about kind of your assessment of the current brand around cybersecurity and whether or not that is inhibiting or helping to attract students that would not otherwise go into computer science, IT, to cybersecurity, right? Because, you know, when you think about some of the efforts underway with NICE and NIST, you know, these are things that you're already getting kind of the current pipeline, but how do you get additional students who might not otherwise think about that? And then in addition to that, just what role the government could play in supporting that, and specifically this model of apprenticeships that has recently come out in the executive order. Is that helpful, or is that something that you think industry may not immediately kind of jump on?
Thank you all very much. My name is Heywan. I'm currently at the World Bank doing Internet of Things for Agriculture project. My question kind of builds upon from one of the questions already raised. Coming from professional and academic training in international relations and international policy background, what would be your piece of advice to build technical skills as a woman who is a little too old for Girl Scouts or the Girls Coding program? to, really apply my policy and international development interests to leverage cybersecurity, the importance of cybersecurity in the field.
Hi, my name is Ann Kokis, and I'm an assistant professor of media studies at the University of Virginia, and I do research on U.S.-China media and technology relations. But this is actually related to my students. So in media studies, we have predominantly female students who understand socio and technical systems really, really well. And I teach a class called Media and Cybersecurity, and by the time they finish, they're like, how can I work in this field of cybersecurity? And I would love to be able to give them better advice on specifically how they could leverage their experience in media studies and their understanding of those socio-technical systems to kind of specific entry-level types of positions within the government. Or, barring that, like different ways to kind of get technical training at kind of not necessarily at the level of engineering, but at the level that leverages their experience and understanding to be able to kind of move forward in that career field, because it's like rooms full of women who are just like, how can I also be a technical professional? And I feel like there's more that I could be doing there. So thank you.
So that's both very encouraging to hear, but it does raise links to our second question. A lot of people, particularly I guess in DC, come out with policy degrees, and recognize that they need to have technical smarts to get ahead. Outside of sort of joining the Girl Scouts and doing a master's degree, what opportunities are available? And then picking up the question about sort of bro culture and other different ways of learning apprenticeships. Dig into anything that takes your fancy.
So I actually love the brand question, right? Because I think cybersecurity gets a bad rep today, and we need to change that, right? So cybersecurity people walk in the room and they're like, no, right? Like, what are you going to tell me I can't do today? And that's wrong. Like, we have to change that. And I think that was where the field started, right? As we were bolting it on, right? We weren't baking it in. And so we came in and said, you got to stop that sort of bad behavior that we consider in cyber and do something different. We should be evolved enough where we added into the front now, so we enable the mission from the beginning. I think to your point earlier, if we raise a more security-aware and privacy-aware generation, this will be demanded so we can get out of this mentality. Cyber should be a mission enabler. Absolutely. And I think if you do it that way, and then you talk about some of like the protection and the defense side of it, it could be really fun and exciting. And it's a way to sell this field where people may be interested that don't know it. That's my opinion on that. From the technical side, you don't need to be an expert, right? I think you need to know enough of the fundamentals of the technical to know how it applies to whatever you're talking about in international or policy. There's so much open source training out there right now. Certified ethical hackers, that's the fundamental of how a computer system works, how it could be attacked, how it could be defended. I kind of start there, and I'm not even saying pursuing that certification, but learning how to go get that certification will give you some of that technical background that gives you some of those creds where you can at least speak it. And then from the media perspective, I think that's fascinating. So what comes to mind immediately for that is training, right? So, because that's kind of an outreach thing. We need way more people that can go and speak about cyber. And so it's related to media a little bit, but the general awareness training, user-based training, how we go out and speak to people from that technical perspective in a way that they can understand it, which media people are kind of taught to do, to think differently about it. So that's an area that both federal and private, I've seen both. I mean, everybody has a fairly robust training program, or they're certainly building it up. And that's just what comes to mind first. There's probably more there. I just need to think about it a little bit.
Just on that media side, almost every large federal organization, their public affairs office today is going to have somebody who can talk cyber. I mean, just everybody, someone who's going to be able to speak technically. That's one source. Then in major publications, newspapers, everybody now has got a cyber or a tech lead. And look for apprenticeship opportunities with the newspapers and print media, as well as online media opportunities. Those are the two that come to mind for me. Yeah.
Let's move across to this side of the room. We'll work from the back in two goes. So right at the back, right at the back of the room, then the lady in the back row, and then the lady in the third back row.
Hi, good afternoon. Kishana Cooley from DHS. Hi, Randy. Hi, the question that I have, being that there's so many young students inside the actual room or young people that are coming into the actual cybersecurity field, how do we teach them to be secure internally? We secure systems from a confidentiality, integrity, as well as an availability of information, but once they get inside the actual profession, how do we teach them to be secure and confident within it? Because women, just as much as we want women to come into the field, is just as quick they're leaving the field because they don't see people that look like them, or when they're actually having the actual cyber discussions, the diversity within the field. So what recommendations that you can give to a lot of the young people that are in the room to teach them how to secure themselves first before coming into the field so that they can face or deal with adversity once they get into the field and be able to maintain themselves in the field?
Great question. You're against the back wall, behind you.
Yes, Sean Waterman. I'm a reporter with the Scoop News Group. Thanks very much for holding this event. I wanted to ask a question about government service in the current administration. I mean, we have a White House where, there are some senior officials who are clearly ambivalent, at least, about the prospect of large-scale non-Anglo immigration into the United States. We have a president who has boasted about sexual assault. Is that an issue for government workforce, cyber recruitment right now?
And one more, I think in the second or third row. Yes.
Hello, Nurgul Kunz, and I'm from post-Soviet space, formerly a Fulbright scholar, but practice PCVE, so preventing and countering violent extremism. So absolutely in terms of defense security, right? A soft background with zero cybersecurity background, which is super important for PCV. So my question is actually twofold. First, when you talk about policy people, how popular among your networks policy background with zero cybersecurity background people? And second is, how popular is the investment into those who come with zero cybersecurity backgrounds into cybersecurity to gain certain training while doing cybersecurity? Thank you.
So 3 questions, one about retention, one about the state of the federal cybersecurity workforce, and one about how to get those sort of policy smarts if you're coming from outside of the cybersecurity area.
Great to see another Fulbrighter in this room. I've been talking to several young students to meet career women who have a policy background and who do not necessarily have background of cybersecurity on their resume at this stage, but they are interested in getting into the cybersecurity field. So from my own observation, I would say that the cybersecurity is getting really popular among policy people. So the next question is how to get into this field, because I don't have anything on cybersecurity on my resume at this stage. But good news is that because these days, all of the organizations or government or academia or nonprofit organizations do cybersecurity a little bit these days. So you can relate your background a little bit to cybersecurity, saying like, hey, so because I've been doing this, and they're relevant to cybersecurity. So I have an amazing colleagues who have international trade background, and she did an international trade policy in the government, and she also helped trade associations. And she was able to take advantage to bring her knowledge and contacts to our company to help us and to get smart about and to look at cybersecurity from international trade and international relations perspectives. So I'm sure that everybody in this policy field can bring values to this field.
So on that, I think Ian's advice is spot on. Publish something, so demonstrate your ability to take what you are an expert in and apply it to cyber, right? So first, if you're sending resumes in or if you're especially applying online, there are some keyword searches, right? So cyber has to show up somewhere. So put it there. Put it in the title of an article that you've done so you can at least get through that automated check. But then just demonstrate that you have the capacity to go learn, that you've done research in this area. So maybe you don't have any professional accomplishments yet, but that'll take you a long way in establishing that you're ready to enter this field. I can only speak to my government experience there, where I've seen many policy people with no technical background move into this field because it was so new and it needed to be filled. So I think it's quite possible. I don't know how that looks outside of government. Sean, for your question, I believe that cyber is a nonpartisan issue. Do I think that the administration is having an impact on the ability to recruit and hire? I don't know. I think the field is exciting enough and there is a lot of opportunity that it's an area where, I can just say from a federal hiring perspective, we did not have a shortness in applications. So we did not see any decline in that. We do have not we anymore, but DHS had special hiring authorities that enabled us to hire better, faster, quicker, and I never saw a drop off since the change in administration. And that final question, I encourage people to go seek out, right, to build a network, either whether it's an official mentor, whether it's a buddy, whether it's somebody that they could just talk to about what they're seeing, and then maybe find a leader that can help them navigate through it. It can be frustrating. I think it's still frustrating for all of us in this field, but it doesn't have to be so overwhelming that we're losing people because of it. But just to name it and actually begin that conversation, I think people will find that there's many that feel the same way, and there's safety in numbers that way.
I was just going to comment, and I think you probably said almost everything I was going to say, which is great, perfect. This notion of securing yourself, if you are the one and only, and feeling like a lonely one in a group, in a crowd, is first making sure you have a good sense of what your personal values are, and that you stick with them no matter what, absolutely no matter what. And that you surround yourself outside of that environment with people who can support you, who can give you critical assessments of you, who can help you to develop and grow and be confident in where you are. But stick with your values.
And I think that's a great note on which to end. I know there are other people who wanted to ask questions, but we're very fortunate in that our panelists have agreed to hang around for a little while. So please come and ask some questions, get some advice, get guidance, and we'll be hanging around for a little while. I just want to finish by saying a number of things. Firstly, thank you very much to our panelists who are fantastic, and I can confidently predict this won't be the last time you see any of them on this stage, so we will be returning to these issues. We have just incidentally concluded a partnership with Florida International University, who a university who are very, very focused on diversity and increasingly interested in cybersecurity. So I think we're going to be returning to these issues. And for those of you who are not aware of it, please check out our Humans of Cybersecurity blog on medium.com, which is very much focused around providing a platform for women and minorities and others who come from diverse backgrounds in the cybersecurity community. Some fantastic articles apart from anything else, but well worth reading. And finally, thank you to Palo Alto Networks who paid for our breakfast and helped bring this event. And finally, thank you very much for all of you. It's important to, I think, the cybersecurity community to have these conversations, and they're much better conversations if we have really great people engaged in them. So thank you very much.